Hey there, stackers. Welcome to another recording of Money in the Morning. I was just talking to you, and I realized that I was still in like the green room area. This is a Money in the Afternoon recording of Money in the Morning. So if you're wondering why a show called Money in the Morning is happening now, it's because we got to it now. But we had a fun SB Live earlier with hanging out with our SB friends, our Stacking Benjamins friends. Sorry. Hooking up my soundboard. Oh, we've got one little thing we got to fix, and I'll be right back. So some big news today. I announced earlier that the basement is moving, but then I also just found out just before this, we have a new home in Detroit. The place we thought we were going couldn't get their act together, and the play people were working with in the other two cities, the Improv in Kansas City and in Orlando. By the way, if you wonder what the hell I'm talking about, we're doing a live show, 3 live shows coming up in late September and October. And when we do those shows, 2 of them are at the Improv. The third one in Detroit was at another place. That place couldn't get their act together. And so we pulled the ripcord on that and just hooked up with a new place and just talked to them on the phone. It's confirmed we are going to Go Comedy, which is in Ferndale, very close to the place where I will be living when I move back to Detroit. So I'm very pleased that we've got a killer house to have our show at. All right, let's check out the sound here and get ready to go. Sound check on that sounds good. Let's move into the main theme. Boy, that's loud. Everything sounds loud today, doesn't it? All right, that's that. Good. We got those going. So this is for tomorrow's recording of the show. Okay. Just got a note from Steve, our engineer, that he's getting me tomorrow's show for Stacking Benjamins, and we'll be editing that. Yeah, Andy. It just, I don't know what the deal is. It didn't scream before, and now today it decided that it's going to just scream at me. So what do you do? All right. Let me get our 2 headlines. Ugly headline number 1, potentially ugly headline number 2. And let's get this thing moving, huh? Shall we? And don't forget, if you're here, which you wouldn't be, well, if you're here live, some people will watch the replay of this later, but if you're here live, make sure that you put the put comments down, and we'll get you on the show, right? So you can be a star on our live Facebook audience as we record the podcast. Okay. Money in the Morning for tomorrow. Start that over. And now it's quiet. No idea. Here we go. Back in the day, About to tell you Grandpa Joe's story. Back in the day when I was a financial planner, people would ask me what the best investment was. And it's funny, we'd always see the wrong people respond to the wrong stimulus. So people that were just trying to get out of debt would listen to Jim Cramer talk about stocks. And even though Cramer is a guy who on CNBC, and if you don't know who Cramer is, he's a guy that goes sell, sell, sell and presses buttons and gets all crazy and wanders around his studio. It's really fun to watch. But people that had a lot of debt and hadn't bought stocks before in their life are now talking about buying stocks the Jim Cramer way on his show, which isn't the right thing. Or people would read Rich Dad Poor Dad and they talk about small cap stocks and flipping houses. Again, maybe the wrong audience. Today we're going to talk about that specifically, about getting what you want for yourself and making sure that you're listening to the right people and you're doing the right thing with your money. That's today on Money in the Morning. Live from my mom's half-finished basement. It's a Friday edition of Money in the Morning. Hey there, stackers. I'm Joe Salsi. Hi, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And welcome to the show where we take two headlines, usually financial headlines. Today, one finance headline, one business headline. And we talk about those, tell you what you might want to think about them when it comes to a sound financial plan. And then in a crazy twist at the end of every show, we take these two headlines that seem to have nothing to do with each other and we give you a big idea to take with you about your day, and that's Money in the Morning. Money in the Morning is brought to you by FamZoo. You know, if you've got kids that are bored at home this summer, maybe take this opportunity to teach them about how money works the modern way. No longer is it folding bills in your wallet. It's all about teaching them about the dangers of plastic, about teaching them about responsible uses of money in small doses so when they're on their own, they can learn big dose money management on their own. It's called FamZoo. Head to StackyBenjamins.com/FamZoo. Use our link and that tells them that we sent you. All right. We're not just sending you to FamZoo. We're sending you to these headlines. So why don't we get this party started, Laura?
Here come two headlines ripped from the financial press. Only at Money in the Morning.
Thank you very much, Laura. Hey, our first headline comes to us from Napa-Net, the National Association of Plan Advisors. These are the people that handle 401ks, pension plans, that kind of thing. Surprise, this piece by Ted Godbout reads, Rothification may be back on the table. I like that word, don't you? Rothification. Just kind of rolls off the tongue. Rothification. What the heck's that? Wait, we'll tell you. There's no rest for the weary on Capitol Hill, this piece says, as what was once thought of as dead may rise up from the policy ashes. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady, a Republican from Texas, clearly plans to revisit tax reform this year. And if the rumors are correct, he may try to revisit last year's purported proposal to limit pre-tax 401k deferrals and move toward a Roth-type scheme as part of the so-called, quote, Tax Cut 2.0. Speaking at a June 26th Washington Post event entitled Tax Reform in America, the 6-month report, Brady announced he would be releasing additional tax cut proposals that include retirement savings provisions. Quote, the timeline will be to begin circulating a draft for our House Republicans after we return from the 4th of July break, Brady stated. We'll spend the month listening to our colleagues in the House about what they want to see in 2.0 and incorporating those changes. I expect to see the legislative outline released in early August with votes in the fall, depending on when the leadership wants to schedule them. Brady explained that he views the legislative effort as a package of 2, 3, or 4 approaches, one of which would be to make the TCJA, which is set to expire in 2027, permanent. He also noted that he intends to revisit areas of retirement savings that were not addressed in tax reform. And that's the piece from Napa-Net. Interesting stuff happening in Capitol Hill. And listen, even if you're not part of the United States of America, you live someplace else, there may be lessons here for you too. But let's start off with our friends here in the United States. All right. So we just had tax reform. Some big changes that you're going to see happening because of the last tax reform are this, especially if you have a house, things change. It used to be that you could deduct home equity lines of credit, home equity lines, home equity loans, those loans and lines on a house loan are no longer going to be deductible. They'll say bye-bye. But if you go, oh no, I've been deducting that every year, but wait, there's more. Even if you have a home loan, you might not be able to deduct it anymore. And the reason you might not be able to deduct it is because they've taken the standard deduction. So the standard deduction is this deduction that the government gives to everybody. They say, hey, this is the amount of your income that you can deduct and not pay any tax on it. And it's different if you're married, if you're single, head of household, different ways to look at your standard deduction. So we won't go into that. But you used to be able to do this thing, you still can, called itemized deductions. And you take as many itemized deductions as you can. And if you had more than the standard deduction, you could take those too. You also had exemptions for your children. And that made it more complicated. So you have a bunch of kids. That gives you these other exemptions on your tax. And then you have the standard deduction. The standard deduction now has nearly doubled. And we're seeing that you now get a different type of tax break for your kids. You get a tax credit for kids. And no longer do you have kids and members of your family treated the same way. But the big thing is this, is that even if you have a house with a mortgage on it, because the standard deduction has doubled, the chance that you're going to itemize has gone down where 2/3 of Americans will no longer be able to deduct anything. That part passed. There's a lot of other stuff that passed, but that part passed. The part that didn't pass, the part that was cut before this came to fruition, was something they were talking about early on last year, which was making the 401k so it was all after-tax money. And because of that, you would no longer get that tax break right off the front, right? If you save into a 401k, a traditional 401k pre-tax, that means you go in and it's as if you didn't earn the money yet. When you get to retirement, you pull that money out, then you pay the tax. And of course, for a lot of people, you're living on less money in the lower tax bracket. And the way the science it purportedly works, hopefully you pay a lot less tax on that money and it grows tax deferred. Pretty cool. Possibly going bye-bye. Decent chance that goes bye-bye. And the fact that this is the second time we've seen this proposal means that we're probably headed that way sooner or later anyway. So as a financial planner, I think that when we look at 401k reform, I think to myself as a financial planner, is there a decent probability this will happen? Yes. But here's the key. I would often meet with people in my office about pending legislation, about thoughts that Congress people had. We don't act on that yet. What we do, though, and this is the big takeaway from headline number 1, we set up our plan never based on what the government will do. And this is why this is important for people no matter where you live. You live in the US, you live Canada, wherever you live. Don't set up your plan based on what the government will do or based on what you hope the government will do. Base it on flexibility. So I really I can't stand it when I read blogs, when I hear podcasters talk about going all Roth with your money. You might be headed there anyway, right? Based on this article, might be headed there, but use tax diversification because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I get the bird in the hand now. If I have some of my money pre-tax, some of my money in the Roth, the after-tax option. And if you're in Canada, those are a tax-free savings plan, same thing as a Roth. And then, of course, you have your pre-tax plans in the great nation of Canada to our north as well. Not sure what we have to the south of us. I'm not sure what Mexican tax shelters look like. But having lived very close to the border of Canada, we'd see all of the RRSP, Registered Retirement Savings Plan. We'd see those, and we'd see the TFSA, Tax-Free Savings Account plan often there. And now that I live in Texas, I never see the same thing for our friends on the South. Not sure what they are, how they exist at all. But that's not the point. The point is, don't do stuff based on what you think the government's going to do. Use flexible plans. And I like having money in a pre-tax position so I get the bird in the hand today. And then I like the Roth money so that I can capture tax savings down the road. If I've got both of them, I don't have to worry about this at all. This is not a huge thing. But do I think it's going to happen? I think the more we hear about it, the more it enters the stream of consciousness. the better the chance. And the higher the debt load gets, the more the government's going to have to figure out how to pay down this debt, and getting all this pre-tax money to be taxed today and then giving people the tax shelter where they get tax-free later on, I think is something that makes a lot of sense. I just talked about the government and talked about makes a lot of sense, which is, again, why we don't base our plan on what a government will do. Hey, going to say a quick hello to our friends who are hanging out with us on Facebook. We do this podcast recording live in front of a Facebook studio audience, which is a little bit like walking the high wire without a net, because we don't edit the show at all. We just kind of do it, and we do it live. And right now, it's kind of quiet there. I think people are wondering exactly what they're going to do if things change with their 401ks. Andy's here. Andy helped us with our sound check at a time. Thanks, Andy. And thanks to everybody else hanging out with us today. Let's go into our second headline then, shall we? This one comes to us from the Financial Times. It's written by Shannon Bond in San Francisco and David Crow in New York. Amazon. You've heard of that company, haven't you? Little tiny company based in Seattle. Amazon shakes healthcare business with a pharmacy deal. Shares in large U.S. pharmacy chains drop sharply after pill pack deal. So Amazon, who just got into grocery, now decides that they're going to get into the pharmacist business. Let's read the piece. Amazon declared its intention to move into U.S. healthcare business by acquiring an online pharmacy group that delivers prescriptions to the homes of patients with chronic ailments, sending investors fleeing from traditional drugstore chains. The acquisition of PillPack, a pharmacy that focuses on customers in need of multiple daily prescriptions, follows months of anxiety in the healthcare industry that Amazon would start selling prescription drugs in its quest to make itself a one-stop shop for everything from batteries and clothing to television, food, film, music. The retailer already captures more than $4 out of every $10 spent online in the U.S., and the prospect of it muscling into the pharmacy business shares in America's biggest chemist fall sharply on Wall Street. Walgreens Boots Alliance, which replaced General Electric in the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Monday, was down 10% by midday in New York trading yesterday, while CVS Healthcare, the U.S. Largest drugstore operator, was down nearly 7%. Last year, Amazon paid $13.7 billion to buy Whole Foods to accelerate its ambitions in the food business, which had a similar immediate effect on the shares of grocery chains such as Kroger and Costco. But most grocers have since recovered, a sign that Amazon's push into healthcare may take longer than some investors presently anticipate. The piece goes on from there about Amazon. And by the way, thanks a ton to our friend Lori in our Facebook group for bringing this up. If you've got a headline you want us to talk about, by the way, either email to me, joe@stackingbenjamins.com, or join our Facebook group where we talk about stuff like this. stackingbenjamins.com/basement will get you directly to the link to go join us there. So, in fact, Lori's here with us now. Hey, Lori. Lori says, Amazon, the behemoth, could be good, could be bad. Heck of a disruptive business plan. Well, I think there's two fronts, and I think, Lori, there's two lessons from this piece that you brought to our attention. I think that let's start off if you're an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, one thing that I learned is if you're going to get into a commodity business, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And somebody with better technology, and listen, unless you're somebody that's on the edge of technology and you have a disruptive plan for technology about how to make the distribution chain and the logistic chain work better and how to make it cheaper, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And Amazon has a history of doing this, right? They did it in shoes. They did it in toys. They've done it in books. Like, Amazon will help you race to the bottom. And right now, when you look broader picture, it's Amazon and Walmart going back and forth, right? And by all accounts, Amazon's beaten Walmart at what originally was Walmart's game. But so I think if you're somebody who is an entrepreneur, you have to look at things like customer service. You have to serve your way you have to serve your customers in a way that the commodity doesn't matter as much as the service does, right? Staying away from those commodity businesses is, I think, a much, much healthier business plan for 99% of the businesses out there than going after the commodities. I always see people struggle when they try to sell things on Amazon. Friends of ours that follow the show here sell stuff on Amazon and watch Money in the Morning, listen to Stacking Benjamins. those people tell me about the struggles that they have. They'll do great with a product and somebody comes along and they will undercut them. And by the way, if you read the book about Amazon, the Everything Store, a lot of the time people believe that it's actually Amazon in disguise that's undercutting you. They figure out what's hot. They help you, or you help them with research, and then they go eat your lunch. It's just competition and you're using their platform. But if you stay away from the commodity, I think it works a lot better. When I was in Detroit, I had a client who was second in command of a machine shop, what they call a tier 3 machine shop. So you'd have the big automotive companies in Detroit, and then you'd have the tier 1s, which supply directly to those people, and then the tier 2s that supply parts to those tier 1s, and then the tier 3s are the little machine shops that supply parts and nuts and bolts and little things that go into the tier 2 to go into the tier 1 to go into the car, right? So this guy's second in command at a tier 2. They got wiped out, just wiped out as the business went more and more global leading into 2007, 2008, and watching General Motors and Chrysler go through these bankruptcy protections, and watching Ford do everything in their power to not go through that. And what's funny is when they were getting knocked around, the way that they got out of it was they stopped catering to these big commodity style companies. What they did was a commodity for General Motors. Instead, they made these custom parts for people in a garage that like to make hot rods. And they were able to maintain these much, much, much higher margins, making these parts in smaller supply that their big competitors around the globe couldn't deliver in the same exact way. And also, by the way, they have people that are very appreciative that they're looking at, bringing back stuff for a 73 Camaro or whatever the car might be. Don't know where I pulled that out of. I had a late 70s Monte Carlo Landau, which, by the way, was an awesome car because of the fact it was one of those cars where the ceiling kind of hung down because I left the windows open too many times at night. And so we used a stapler to put that baby back up. Yeah. Classic car. Lots of stories about that car and the number of times I almost killed myself in that car, but that's a whole different podcast. Today we're talking about not being a commodity. And I think that if you're an entrepreneur, that's the lesson here, because Amazon will eat your lunch. There's somebody out there that's going to eat your lunch unless you've got a technology disruption. And then I think it's still a more dangerous way to go. The second lesson, though, is for investors. And this one probably is for more of us that are watching this or listening to this podcast. And that's this lesson. People ask us all the time about sector investments. And when you talk about sector investments, you're looking at a much bigger pile of risk than you are if you diversify. So I really like sector investments. I like investing in pharmaceuticals as an example, which is what this is. But now you're seeing that Amazon could disrupt this whole pharmaceutical chain and the whole pharmaceutical game. So if you're going to go into a sector like that, or like technology, telecommunications, whatever it might be, automotive, we just talked about, if you're going to buy sector investments and focus on those sectors, it's not a bad thing, by the way. It could be a great thing. And we'll talk about that in the big picture. But I have to tell you, you can see where the risk is. You have to weed that garden far, far more often than you have to weed the S&P 500 or the total stock index, or an actively managed mutual fund, right? Where you've got some manager who's buying and selling stuff in different sectors. I think that's our lesson, is live and die by the commodity business. If you're making a product, or if you're buying a product, or if you're an investor, sector investments, maybe for the win and the loss. Let's say hello to our friends on Facebook again. Andy says, live and die by commodities. That explains why you do podcasts instead of growing blueberries. Exactly. Andy must know that I'm from the blueberry family. If you're in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and you talk about the Seahigh family, we were the blueberry family when I was growing up. Whole different story there. But exactly. Get out of blueberries, Andy. Get into podcasting, because podcasts are not a dime a dozen today. And it's not like they're free, right? You pay a bunch of money for this. Clearly a fantastic business model, Andy. Susan's here with us just saying hi. Hey, Susan. And Andy, going back to our first piece, Andy says he started with tax deferred in early years of savings and now has converted savings to Roth. I didn't realize the true benefits of Roth until more recently. Yeah, which is why I like both. There's this cool thing, Andy, called the tax triangle. And I really like all three. So I brought it up. So let's take a second and explain the tax triangle. On one end, you have these investments that go in pre-tax when you're putting money in. But then when you pull money out during your retirement years, that money comes out and it's all taxable. What's that? Of course, that's your 401k. It's a 403b. It's a normal 457 plan. It's a normal pre-tax plan in the USA or pre-tax wherever you live. RRSP in Canada. Then the next one is the opposite. When you put money in, you don't get any real tax benefit. But when you pull money out, you can pull it out tax-free for retirement or whenever you spend it. What's that one? That's your Roth IRA, your Roth 401k. It also can be municipal bonds, even though municipal bonds can sometimes have taxation on Social Security is an example. Also, money in some cash value life insurance policies. Now, the life insurance thing's a dangerous game because you're paying for the life. You're not paying tax, but you're paying for the life insurance. But you can also do it that way. So they're included there. So that's the second. The third one gives you no real tax benefit in. In fact, along the way, any dividends that you have, any capital gains, if you move money around, you're going to pay tax as you go, but you can pull money out whenever the hell you want. You're not restricted on the day, the time, the using loopholes, whatever that is. Of course, that's just a regular brokerage account, a savings account. I like looking at all three of those pieces of your pyramid and see how they compare. And normally you'll see people, Andy, to your point, that have a bunch of money in that pre-tax spot and almost no money in the Roth spot, which you figured out, which is great. Build that spot, but also keep some money in that flexible spot. So we call that the tax triangle, and we look to have some balance, not complete balance between those, but make sure you've got some of each, because as our first piece said, you never know where things are going to go. All right, in just a second, we're going to mesh these two together. Phenomenal end of the show. Fireworks, everything, maybe a little hyperbole. But we're going to take these two headlines. We'll mash them together and talk about what the big idea is. But first, one big idea, if you've got kids, is this place called FamZoo. If you haven't heard of FamZoo, hold on. Because if you've taught kids about money in the past, or if you look at the way your parents taught you about money, or maybe they didn't teach you about money, now in summer's the best time to teach your kids about finance. And a great way to do it is FamZoo. Not only are you going to begin teaching them the dangers and how plastic works, you're also going to set them up for the future, because nobody takes dollars out of their wallet. And if you look in the future, fewer people are going to take dollars out of their wallet than now in the future. Your kids are much more likely to use plastic. And not only that, if we look at things like allowances, you can transfer allowances over to their FamZoo account. You can turn on and off their ability to spend using FamZoo. Whatever it is, whatever you want to teach about stocks and bonds and track those, you can do that phantomly in your FamZoo account. StackyBenjamins.com/FamZoo to tell them that we sent you. All right, let's do our big idea, guys, and then we're out of here for today. Our first headline, of course, was about maybe 401k reform coming. We thought that maybe we weren't going to see 401k reform last year when they passed, earlier this year, rather, when they passed the tax reform. But we're looking at tax reform 2.0 now. And as part of tax reform 2.0, might we see traditional pre-tax go away so the government could take more money today to pay down some of this debt? Chances are getting better. But our big takeaway there, don't base your plan on what the government will do. Look, like we just talked to Andy's point, for balance between the different pots of money that you have. Look for tax diversification. And I think you don't have to worry as much about what the government might or might not do. Our second piece came to us from our friend Lori, who is in our Facebook group. And Lori talked about Amazon, actually Financial Times and Lori talked about Amazon shaking up the healthcare business because they just signed a pharmacy deal, and lots of people thinking that Amazon might get into the pharmacy business. And there's two takeaways there. If you have a hustle, if you own a business, you're going to live and die by the commodity business. Commodity businesses, going to be tough. It's going to be a race to the bottom, and you're going to try to survive on low margins. Think about higher margin businesses for a much easier win, and maybe for more fun doing what you do, unless you've got the disruptive technology. And if you're an investor, remember these sector businesses, these sector bets, People ask us all the time about investing in sectors. It can be a big winner, but you got to weed that garden quite a bit to keep up. So what do these two headlines have to do with each other? I think today what they have to do with each other, and the big idea today, is this concept of standard deviation. And we talk about standard deviation a fair amount, but I realized today when I was prepping for this that we don't define standard deviation very often. So let's talk about this, because people ask us all the time, Joe, what's the right investment? And it depends on who you are. I was talking to some certified financial planners a couple of years ago about Kramer and buying individual stocks, and talking to them about the bigger pockets guys and real estate, or talking about, and it could be a lot of different people in real estate. It could also be Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter talking about small cap stocks or flipping houses. Like, these things are super duper dangerous, and yet they can be the perfect way to get rich. They're all phenomenal ways to get rich. Buying individual stocks, phenomenal way to get rich. Absolutely. Real estate, fantastic way to become wealthy. Seen that happen quite a few times. Owning your own restaurant, your own business, fantastic. The key there, and what's funny is these certified financial planners I was talking to, they were talking about, I'd never recommend those in the world. And I said, why not? They're a way to get rich. Because they're too risky. And it's funny because my first thought was, are you paying attention to your risk, or are you paying attention to your client's risk? Because for some clients, that's what they want. I remember clients that came to me saying, Joe, I want to become super filthy rich. You're never, ever going to become super filthy rich investing like Dave Ramsey. And yet Dave Ramsey is a guy who's taught plenty of people how to become financially independent, right? How to get into an all cash lifestyle, and how to begin this financial revolution that we're seeing starting, where I'm going to live on cash. I'm going to afford things first, and then I'm going to buy it later, instead of let society tell me what to buy and then I figure out how to pay for it later. Ramsey got a lot of people there, but Dave Ramsey didn't get rich that way. Dave Ramsey got rich by owning a small business, which was one of those dangerous ways I talked about earlier. Standard deviation is this, and this is how you define a great investment for you. Standard deviation is the difference between investments that are high risk, high reward, and investments that are low risk, low reward. So some investments that are high reward, like small company stocks, also are super high risk. And all that means is the standard deviation super high, right? If it can go super up, it can also go super down. On the other side, if we're going to diversify very appropriately and very conservatively, we just lower the standard deviation. We're not going to make a lot, but we're not going to lose a lot. And the longer time period you have, the more of these high standard deviation investments might make sense. These approaches might make sense, because you can make mistakes and you've got time to recover from them and get your money back, right? That's standard deviation. Here's the key to standard deviation. If somebody tells you something is high return, no risk, there's no such thing. There is zero such thing. Something is high risk, high reward, like small company stocks, like flipping houses. Fantastic way to make money. Also a fantastic way to lose your ass. There's no free lunch. Sorry, there is none. On the other side, people worried about safety. Oh, I don't want to go into the S&P 500. It's too much risk. Those are stocks. Well, if you leave all your money in a savings account, you're very safely going to get nowhere. And you're going to have to save dollar for dollar every penny you want to earn later, that you want to spend later. You can't do that. Well, you can do that, but you're not going to get much. Standard deviation is a great thing to learn about. Fantastic. And I think it also protects your downside from salespeople who want to sell you something different. And I think we end this based on what our friend Dylan, who's here with us in our Facebook audience, says. He says, I may not be filthy rich, but I can be rich and filthy. I'm not even sure what the hell that means, but we're going to leave it there, Dylan. Hey, thanks a lot to Dylan. Thanks to everybody who's hanging out with us on Facebook today. Thanks for all of you listening at home or wherever you are. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy. Go stack some Benjamins. Bye-bye.
Money in the Morning is created by Joe Saul-Sehy and is brought to our channels by our producer and engineer, Richie Rutter-Reese. Stacking Benjamins and Money in the Morning are for entertainment purposes. Before making moves, consult with your financial advisor. Looking for training sessions? Kathleen Selmans has a great suite of Stacking Benjamins tools, so head on over to learn.stackingbenjamins.com. Hoping to chat with us on the web? Say hello to Shannon Cowan, our social media guru and community manager in our Facebook group. She can be found at stackingbenjamins.com/basement. From the basement, I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. See you tomorrow.
That was funny. That was incredibly funny. And Susan, I don't know if you're still here, but just found out my Tigers lost again today. Again, I think it's 9 in a row. Stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. That's horrible. All right. I think that does it. By the way, for those of you that weren't here at the beginning of this, we have a new, if you're in the Detroit area, we finally found a home in Detroit. Just before we did this, I found out that we're going to be at Go Comedy in Ferndale, which is a nice place to be. I know I'm never going to do that. I have to admit that was pretty damn funny though. Cause I remember on my birthday, just how damn drunk I was when I was doing that, which I wasn't driving anywhere. And, one night a year, but holy cow, I just dug in, could not figure out why I felt so bad. Thought I had the flu. Apparently it was something different. All right, guys, we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.